ladies and gentlemen. We're going to start the next session now. This is a session on future cities. We're delighted to welcome Peter Chamley, who's the chairman for Australasia for Arup, Aileen Zosa, Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President for the Philippines Bases Conversion and Development Authority, Yasser Helmy, Head of Smart Cities for the Asia-Pacific region at Cisco, and in a slight change, unfortunately Derek Wang from Alibaba Cloud is unwell, but his colleague Jessie Yu, Senior Product Lead from Alibaba Cloud Singapore, has agreed very kindly to join us today for this panel. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Peter. I want to start immediately with you. Lots of talk about smart cities, but is there substance behind it, or is it just a buzzword?
I think a bit of both. I think there is definite substance. There's a lot happening in the smart city space, but I think there is a bit of buzzword about it. And I think those cities who say, right, we're going to create a smart city, we're going to become a smart city, you'd have to question, do they know where they're going? I think those cities who start with, well, what are the outcomes that we want to achieve? What are the problems that we want to solve? And how can we use data and interrogation of data to achieve that? They're the places that are looking to be smart.
Yeah. Derek, I'll jump to you now. Again, buzzword or substance, smart cities?
So we've been in this smart city field for quite a while. And I think there's a little bit of a smart city fatigue, as
Yes.
I like to call it, in a lot of cases. It's somewhat overused, I would say. My view is, what's the alternative? I mean, nobody wants to be in a dumb city,
Dumb
right?
city, yes.
All right.
The sequel,
So
yes.
when do we just stop calling it smart city and just calling it city? Because it's a natural evolution. You know, when did we start calling color TVs just TVs? Because there was black and white TVs and color TVs, right? So I think fundamentally, when smart cities are about quality of life of the citizens, right? I know we're going to talk about technology and so on and so forth, but at the end of the day, unless you feel comfortable in the city where you are, and it's more of a feeling rather than rational things, then the smart cities movement will, in a way, cease to exist, and it will just become a natural evolution of cities. Yeah. That's the way I view it.
Aileen, you are, of course, building a new city. The smart component must be a key part of that.
For us in the Philippines, it's a very real and urgent concept of smart city. But of course, we're going beyond smart cities. The vision is really for a sustainable city, which is another buzzword. And our cities, especially Metro Manila, is very overcrowded. We have problems with traffic, climate change. In fact, in southern Philippines, just last month, there were 3 strong earthquakes, more than 6 in the scale. And this is where BCDA, Bases Conversion and Development Authority, the agency where I come from, is really critical in moving and giving alternatives to the present urbanization in Manila and in the Philippines is now.
At Alibaba Cloud, Jessie, do you look at it as smart cities, or do you look at this as technology that needs to be embraced in the urban environment?
Yeah, so Alibaba Group has been in the market for 20 years, and we have Alibaba Cloud established in 2009. So the time we established Alibaba Cloud, that we have a mission or have a vision to make a better life. So when Alibaba Group, when we started business, it's about e-commerce, and now we expand the business to many other areas. And e-commerce is about online. So when we talk about smart cities, we actually more look at the aspects of intelligent, bring the physical world to the digital world, and how we can help. And from the tech, obviously from the tech perspective, how we can help the city become a more intelligent. Obviously, we start from China. China has in total like 1.4 billion populations, and in the large cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and headquarters of Hangzhou have like more than 20 million populations. So it's a very what we have the tech help is to prioritize the initiatives of smart city, or we'd rather call intelligent city, from the traffic management, from the transportation management, from the different aspects, but it's more about prioritization.
Prioritization, that's very interesting. Peter, an HSBC report I read recently said something like 100 million people in ASEAN will migrate to cities between 2015 and 2030. Phenomenal complications there. What are the priorities for existing cities that are taking this influx of people? What can they do?
Well, I think one of the keys there is to create cities that are livable. I mean, yes, there's going to be tremendous urban population growth, and with that brings all the problems of congestion, traffic, and you know that in Manila, and almost better than anywhere. So I think the challenge for cities is to create a space that is livable, where people actually want to come and live. And the important part of that actually then is as we were discussing earlier, the war for talent.
Yes.
And if cities are to be successful, and to be successful they've got to compete, and if cities need to be successful, the war for talent is something that they need to win. And the talent is looking for somewhere that is livable, somewhere they want to be, somewhere want to work, somewhere they want to play and enjoy themselves. And to do that, the city has to be attractive and a great space to be. So the challenge for cities, I think, in the future is to create spaces as they grow that are really livable and attractive to people who want to come and live.
But how does one do that? We talked about Manila, and it's impossible to get around Manila. It just is. Look at Jakarta, which has improved a little since the metro, but there are a number of cities in ASEAN where you think, I'm landing here, I have to allow 3 hours to get to the hotel. Practically speaking, and we'll go to you, Yasser, what does one do if you're mayor of Manila? How can you use technology to actually make it more attractive for the new influx of people coming in?
You bring up a very good point. How do we use technology to solve a problem?
Yeah.
And this is really fundamentally what we're about. So there are alternatives. I mean, we were just discussing earlier the significant lack of public transportation.
Yes.
For example, in some cities. So one of the easy things is the availability of mass transport in one form or another, but also making it easily accessible and reliable in order for people to use it. But in terms of technology, there are various ways to understand the congestion in the path from point A to point B that you're going through, and then perhaps using artificial intelligence perhaps to suggest alternative ways for you to get from point A to point B. Now, unfortunately, if all the routes from point A to point B are congested, then what do you do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of the things, and this is where you need multimodal forms of transport. If the only thing that's available is the automobile, then we have an issue, and this is why I think new cities are being built, such as New Clark City in the Philippines and other ones around the world, where they're trying to rebuild cities with a new design and a new paradigm to avoid problems such as traffic and so on and so forth. Avoiding current traffic situations, we are limited to the options that are available to us, unfortunately.
Yeah. I want to come down to your planning, because you've got a new city, which I think is a different challenge to existing cities. So Alibaba Cloud, you go to an existing city, you've done a huge amount of work in China. You talked about prioritizations. What is the prioritization for a city which is traffic clogged, where there's the air's barely breathable? How do you prioritize, and how do you use technology to make that existing city more livable?
Every city, I would say, even in China, is different. So they have different cultures, socials, etc. So when we actually adopt, as Yasser mentioned as well, that AI, machine learning, all this technology to aggregate data and do some analysis on the data. It's more about to adopt the culture first. The culture and social aspects are the number one that we take into consideration. So no solution is, no single solution can be applied for all the cities. We have experience in Malaysia, in Macau, even in Singapore, in Jakarta as well. That's the international cities. And when it comes to, when it comes, for example, the traffic, and there are many local rules, regulations, policies also need to apply. That's where we, from tech perspective, that also is a very challenging for us as well. And you have to overcome, you have to incorporate all the different aspects from the public sectors, from authorities, and no single solutions can apply for all.
Okay, please.
But there are ways where tech can help with an existing situation without going to the expense of building a new metro. So just simple things about using technology to control traffic lights better, to get greater flow of traffic, using smart motorway technology to control the flow of traffic on motorways by varying the speed limits, has been shown to increase the throughput. So although traffic might be going a bit slower, it's actually going, in total, it's going faster. So using technology to improve the capacity of existing infrastructure, I think is really important, and that's one of the really easy solutions that a city can impose to try and get the best out of its existing infrastructure.
Aileen,
if I may, just one last comment. So most cities, or all cities, are sitting on vast amounts of data, and most cities don't know the value of the data that they have. And one of the things that we advocate for is really collecting that data, seeing it in a new way, and start correlating between different parts of the data, and that will give you solutions such as the ones that were mentioned around variable speeds, controlling the traffic lights, and so on and so forth. But I think step one is to understand the data that we have, traffic patterns across the week, across the day, and so on and so forth, and using different, I know it's a tech term, but different algorithms, we're able to make things at least slightly better in order, improve traffic congestion and so on and so forth. So data, I think it's critical. And to me, a smart city is a city that uses the data in a smarter way.
I want to come back to that because data clearly is a theme that has come up through every conversation we've had. But Aileen, you're starting from scratch. You have a site, you can start a new city. What's the priority? Is it the transport system? Is it the sustainability? Is it the data collection? Where do you begin?
Well, for us, I think the critical areas are what we call info connectivity and physical connectivity. So we need everything, utilities, land use planning, everything that goes into the building of a future city. And you harness technology not just in transport systems. You harness technology right at the beginning, from the planning stage, from the master plan, from the project management, even from the evaluation of certain projects. New Clark City is very different because New Clark City is logistics-based development, because we try to leverage the assets left by the Americans in Clark Air Base and Subic Naval Base. And so therefore we have a new airport terminal coming up, which will be run by Changi Airport. And we will be connecting Manila to Clark through railway, and Arup is helping us there. And of course, we cannot ignore the importance of Manila. And so therefore, the physical connectivity is something that we really need to address. And that is a challenge because we have to bring businesses and even government offices from Manila to Clark, which is 90 kilometers north of Manila. So if you're asking us which will come first, everything and anything that goes into the building of a smart and sustainable city. But our principle is that we need to bring the citizen in the middle, in the center. It has to be citizen-centric because, as you said, we need to improve quality of life in our cities. We do not want to repeat the mistake of the urban sprawl in Metro Manila.
Climate change, massive issue, especially for cities. What strategies are you implementing or recommending that big cities take to mitigate the impact of?
I suppose there's two aspects to that.
Yeah.
Is what can cities do
Yes.
to reduce the impact, to reduce the global warming? So what can cities do to reduce fossil fuel usage and energy consumption? And then secondly, what can cities do to deal with the impacts? And I suppose under the former, I mean, we would be looking at cities that are looking at smart grids, that are looking to transform to electric vehicles, to looking to decarbonize their own economies. And then separately, in terms of dealing with the impacts of climate change, which seems to be resulting in more extreme events, more extreme weather events and more frequent extreme weather events. I mean, cities having to look at becoming more resilient. So that's maybe not about resisting or having, being able to cope with an extreme event, but perhaps being resilient in that they can bounce back after that extreme event has happened. So having interconnected systems that work well in terms of being able to cope with an extreme weather event or an extreme event like an earthquakes, for example, or tsunamis. How quickly can you get back on your feet after you've suffered this?
So accept that it's going to happen,
assume it's going to
happen, then have a recovery plan.
Yeah. Have you got an integrated recovery plan? Because in terms of a city, city is a connected series of systems that all depend on each other, rather than being separate systems. So how can the city make sure that all those interconnected systems, the water, the power, etc., the food, yes. How food is transported, how can you make sure that all of those systems get up and running again quickly after there's been an extreme event? So rather than thinking, right, we're going to resist it, how can we work with it to get ourselves back on our feet? So cities working hard to look at their resilience, I think, is the real key to dealing with climate change.
Jessie, you're nodding there, and I assume this technology plays a part in the resilience push.
Yeah, and I totally agree that just now we talk about traffic, probably traffic management is one of the key outcomes for smart city operations in the last few years. Many cities probably they prioritize traffic as the first thing they want to improve. In that way that citizens can get the benefits and improve the quality of life. For example, like what we have done in China, a few cities, by implementing the solutions attack, solutions that we managed to reduce the ambulance time from the accident place to the hospital. I think we managed to reduce by 1/4 of the time. So that is something that the citizens, the hospitals, or everyone can benefit from, right? So that is one part. It's easy to carry because that's only the key stakeholders, probably just a few parties like hospital and the traffic management related public sectors. But what earlier we talked about resilience, that's gonna be quite a few. We talk about water, utilities,
yes.
Food. That's gonna be a conjunction or a kind of collaboration across many different public sectors. And we are facing challenges when it's not about tech, it's all about the different public sector, government entities, how they can work together to get these or interconnected systems done.
So it's not a tech issue, it's more about a bureaucratic issue.
Yeah, that's more about the collaborations across all the public sectors, government entities. That one, we do have the tech already, but then how we can collaborate with different public sector, government entities, that's a challenge.
Yeah. Yes, sir, come to you too. The technology playing a role in sustainability. Is it about building resilience, bouncing back, or is there more that could be done to mitigate the impact of climate change using technology?
So I think the first step of managing anything is measuring it and visualizing it. So I think whilst there is some data out there in terms of, what is the impact of transports, cars, manufacturing, and so on and so forth, I don't think there's enough accurate data on the real impact. So measuring it, and this is where technology comes in, there's a variety of ways where we can measure this data, and then based on that data is mitigating against it using a variety of also technology-enabled mechanisms, such as reducing the energy required in public lighting, for example, is a very simple one, and others. But I think, stepping away from technology for a second, it's about setting a vision and a plan to do that. So when Copenhagen, for example, announced that they will be carbon neutral by 2025, that's the vision, right? What did it translate to? It translates that vision is baked into every department in the city. So for example, if you're in the roads department and you're building a new road, they will always check or benchmark it against, is this contributing, am I one step forward to reaching that goal, or am I taking a step back? If you're building a new bus corridor, as an example, does that contribute towards or takes us a step back from that 2025 vision? So it starts with the leadership and then how that's translated into the different plans for the different city departments.
So it's a policy issue, first and foremost. If the policies are set accordingly, the technology will be brought in.
Yes, technology is an enabler at the end of the day. Yeah. It's not the be-all and end-all, even though I work for a technology company, but it's really not the be-all and end-all for smart cities or anything for that matter. Yeah. It's an enabler in order for us to reach those prescribed goals, and those prescribed goals are ultimately set by policies in most cases.
So Aileen, with Clark City, what specific policies are you introducing to ensure this is a sustainable city?
Yeah. In the parlance of city development, and just as an aside, Sir Bana Jurong is our development manager in New Clark City. In the parlance of city development, we're really thinking of an integrated operations center, where all the basic services will be monitored, will be centralized, and there we can take advantage of the synergy of utilities, for example, so we can do energy conservation through the monitoring, through the smart grid system, through an advanced metering infrastructure. And there in the Integrated Operations Center, we can connect the fire department, the security, because this new Clark City is there for investors, for the industrial park developers, for the citizens, for the workers. So we're thinking of not just a smart, resilient, or sustainable city. We're thinking of a socially inclusive city where there are mixed income neighborhoods. And so therefore, we really plan to give back the roads to the citizens. So it's not just, the roads will not just be for traffic or for vehicles, but these will be for pedestrians. So there will be bike lanes. Okay, so this is for the sustainable and green component. In fact, we will be the first government agency that will be issuing green bonds, or we call it sustainability bonds. That is how we commit to the smart, green, intelligent city of the future.
Interesting. Peter, in terms of planning for cities, and you're involved in quite a number of them, how do we incorporate technology into those plans? Is it a central component?
Oh, it has to, these days, it has to be a central component. I mean, starting, as you were saying, colleague was saying about, starting with what are the outcomes that we want to achieve. So if we're planning a new city or a new neighborhood, starting with, well, what do we want to achieve? The starting point being we want to achieve a place that is livable, that is attractive, that people want to be, that they want to spend their time there, live, work, and play. And technology is a really important part of that these days. We can't develop a city without reflecting the needs of technology.
Jessie, data is a big part of that, and Yasser mentioned that earlier, and I'd like to go back to the data question. How do you capture the data you need in a city where you're trying to improve the quality of life?
Well, if we talk about from the traffic standpoint, obviously is the implementation of the IoT devices, connectivity, through the connectivities, and we gather all the data and then run the algorithms to get the results. Results is just one part. Then more important is the insights, how we can drive the insights and the call to actions to different stakeholders to share the, in the end, have to split the data and share with different stakeholders.
Can you give me an example of where you've captured data, where the results have been interesting and you've changed behaviors or something because of it? Can you give me an example of where you've used data to feed back to a service provider and they've made changes accordingly?
Yeah, so for example, through the traffic lights, usually in China, there are maybe 3-4 cameras in a single traffic congestion. It's 3-4 of them. And then when we gather the data from the 3 of them and 3-4, and firstly, there will be a overall kind of aggregation of the data from the different angles, because different camera, they capture different type of data. And then there will be a split between the, across the data, like for example, one maybe talk about the traffic accident, another maybe capture a disabled kind of person, how they can leverage the infrastructure, or there is some weakness of the infrastructure on the road. So there's different aspects, and then there could be some goods on the street, etc. So it could be dangerous or in risk. So that one we can capture from different ways. And then when we feedback to the different stakeholders, there could be aggregation, but then of course we need the authentic authorizations from the different stakeholders. Then could be the single kind of from the command and control center perspective, they can take the actions from there.
Yeah, yes. We talked about data capture using algorithms. Does it also need a central authority to make decisions based on those algorithms?
Central authority. That's an interesting question. One of the challenges we have in smart cities is that the different city departments in legacy cities are not really sharing information.
Yes.
So where does that central authority come from? It depends on where we are in the world, obviously. Yeah. But yes, there needs to be an area of, or an entity that consolidates this data and then makes the analysis, identifies the patterns, and then feeds that back into the different sectors. And correlating different data sets can be very interesting.
Yes.
An example of that, in one of the cities in India, we started off with just looking at air quality data. So through sensors, and you were mentioning how do we collect data, that's just one way, putting sensors out there. We collect this data and we created an air quality map for that city. So this was, fairly simple, fairly straightforward, nothing too, extravagant, it's not rocket science. Yeah. But at the same time, using video analytics technology on the roads, just for vehicle identification, we were able to see how many cars on the road based on private vehicles versus buses and commercial vehicles. That's another data set. So we were able to identify across time what is the effect of public vehicles versus public vehicles on the road and the effect on that on the air quality. And then from there you're able to, you can go with things like congestion charges, that's something like London did, for example, or ERP here, these types of things, or control the amount of public and commercial traffic on the roads. But we added a very interesting third data sets from the healthcare, hospitals. So we identified all of the cases that came in that had lung or respiratory based ailments. And then we were able to correlate directly between the air quality in specific parts of the town or of the city versus healthcare. And then from that, you can extrapolate and say, what is the economic impact of these people being out of the workforce and being ineffective in their jobs? So it started off with a very simple, let's see what the air quality is in the city, but then adding all of these data sets, you get amazing insights.
But what action was taken on that? That's a fantastic example where the direct correlation between air quality, traffic, health, business. But that requires, to resolve that and to improve that, several policy shifts across several departments. So what came of it? Interesting fact, let's move on, or were there real policy changes as a result?
So one of the interesting things they've at least theoretically have done in India is they've created an entity outside of the traditional bureaucracy. And that entity is charged with taking all of this data and acting as a central repository, or that it's not really an authority, unfortunately, and this is where they still need to kind of improve. It's a work in progress. But from that, policies, the idea was that policies will be implemented. They haven't done them yet, to be very frank, but there is the foundation and the framework to change policies based on the data captured and the analysis that was done on that data.
Yeah, and you talked about having a central management control for this data, and I assume that's the basis of your decision to have one, is that you can make quick decisions across the broad spectrum of data sets to improve quality of life.
That's correct, Michael, because we're really talking here of a governance framework and an estate management system. And fortunately, the Basis Conversion and Development Authority is the governing body. It's like an local government unit and an investment promotion agency. It's the governing body for New Clark City, which covers around 36,000 hectares, actually half of Singapore. But our initial development is 9,450 hectares. And so therefore, this integrated operations center is really vital in creating more efficiency, unlocking the value of the government land that we are developing. Just a very simple example is face recognition technology. This is really very vital for a special economic zone, for safety, monitoring public parks, for example. And for example, we're opening up a new terminal building in Clark Airport. And so therefore, technology can be harnessed to enhance safety and protection.
It's quite controversial, though, facial recognition. There are also those who are opposed to it for privacy and other reasons.
That's right. But like car plate recognition, because we are a special economic zone, we have incentives, we give out incentives for tax and duty-free incentives for importation and exportation. So that's very vital for businesses. And so therefore, we envision our city of the future to have very good security, very efficient utilities, and more towards the welfare and the quality of life of the citizens.
Okay. We've got a few more minutes. I want to go around. Oh, please.
No, I was just going to add, actually, this question about the health and air quality and infrastructure. I think we are, in the past, in looking at infrastructure, we've sort of done the traditional cost-benefit analysis of looking at, well, how many cars do we take off the road? How do we improve people's journey time? Or I could think of an example, a really good recent example, where we've been looking at a flood prevention project where build some flood banks and prevent a whole pile of houses being flooded in extreme events. And the cost-benefit analysis traditionally would be the cost of building the flood defences versus the value of the housing that you've protected. Actually, what we've done is we've taken the opportunity to create a linear park. So it's a flood prevention scheme, but it's also a linear park. And that actually we've found has been encouraging people who live in the area to actually take exercise that they would never have taken exercise before. And we're now doing some studies with a local university looking at what are the health benefits of those people taking exercise that would never have taken it before without having built this flood defence project. And the outcome of that seems to be headed towards analysis that shows that actually the health benefits, i.e. people not going to hospital as often, will actually pay for the infrastructure. So, forget about the infrastructure in terms of a traditional cost benefit, but what are the long-term benefits of investment in infrastructure, in improving people's health and people's lives?
Is it a broader vision then that's required, as opposed to let's just fix this problem? It's how can we fix this problem
Look at it,
and have these additional...
an integrated solution that looks beyond just what is the immediate need.
Yeah. I'd like to get around and ask each of you projects that you're working on or involved in or aware of that you think are examples of how one should move ahead in future cities, smart cities. And Jessie, start with you. Are there any cities you're working in or with that you think this is a shining example of actually a model that should be embraced by others?
Well, I've been talking about traffic a lot, so I'm not going to talk about the traffic management anymore, but we are moving to another angle about, for example, as I mentioned earlier, physical world and moving to a digital world. So what we have been doing in Singapore is we have a strategic alliance with Singapore Tourist Board, STB, and the initiative is 3 years initiative. It's not only Alibaba Cloud, but it's on the group level, Alibaba group level. And what we are, so the objective or the very big vision is to bring how we can help Singapore as being a tourist place to improve together with the physical infrastructures and, for example, transportation infrastructures, health care infrastructures, and how we can bring this physical infrastructure to the digital. And one initiative is we have done is global pay, global sell, global buy, global delivery, that we actually introduce by the different technologies across this chain and help Singapore either going to the world, the rest of the world, or bring more tourists to Singapore. That is, in our perspective, is the next generation or maybe the next phase of the so-called smart city, intelligent city. It's about people. And so it's beyond the traditional theme of traffic, etc., but it's more how we can collaborate the people with the rest of the world.
Yes, sir? Yeah. An example of a city that, or of a project?
There are many shining examples in the region. I mean, obviously Singapore is one of them, recognized as one of the smartest cities in the world. In fact, a recent study by IMD in Switzerland and NUS recently found that Singapore is the smartest city in the world. Number 2 is Zurich. Now read what you will into that because IMD is in Switzerland and NUS is here. But regardless of that fact, Singapore is recognized as a very smart city, and they've realized that getting data from multiple sources and not sticking to the traditional siloed environment has its advantages. So lots of work in Singapore, but also in the region here, in places like the Philippines. I was just talking to Aileen earlier. Many cities are realizing that. It's really about how do I get data from multiple sources, correlate it, make decisions, either manually or through AI, some of the ones that are looking at AI, and then really drive action based on that data. There are many shining examples. The only thing I must stress around this is that there's a lot of pilots, POCs, and so on and so forth. I think we haven't reached the stage yet where cities are taking this at scale. And there are many reasons why that is not happening. But until we reach that stage, I think we're stuck in this pilot land. Very, very good examples, very interesting innovation that's happening, not just in the region, but all around the world. But I'm yet to see a city that is willing to take this at scale, and I'm looking forward to that.
I'm really keen to put that to you. We're at the pilot stage, not at scale. Some good examples out there.
Oh, I could think of a couple of good examples. One, Shanghai at the moment. We're doing a lot of work looking at it's very boring drainage. Dealing with rainwater in Shanghai, which is a bit of an issue. As more hard surfaces are built, the rate at which rainfall runs off increases. So we've been done a huge exercise gathering loads of data about land use within Shanghai. So we've now developed an integrated model of the drainage and the rainfall and the land use, where every building, what it's used for, what it's built of, where the rainfall goes. And that has allowed us to make some significant savings in the planning of the cost of future drainage in Shanghai. It sounds really boring, but actually it's been a massive impact. And I think where else, just the use of technology to increase the capacity of motorway networks or rail systems, to shorten the headways between trains by improving signalling systems. That's happening right now.
Okay.
And that's all based on technology and data.
Look, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Aileen, I have no doubt that when we have a conversation next year, or the year after, we're saying Clark City, a model of the smart city, and we'll get you to talk to us about where you are with that. I'm afraid we're out of time. We have to move on to our closing piece now. Please join me in thanking my panellists.